Let me stop you right there. Before I tell you what happened on that stage, I need you to do one thing for me. Picture the oldest person you love. Maybe it's your grandfather. Maybe it's a great uncle who smells like menthol and wood smoke and has been telling the same 3 jokes since the Nixon administration. Maybe it's the relative who shows up to every holiday dinner wearing the same pressed slacks, eating the same piece of pie, and complaining about the same thing he has been complaining about since before you were born. Now picture that man standing at a Family Feud podium. 81 years old, hearing aids in both ears, bifocals on, wearing a jacket he pressed himself that morning. Steve Harvey leaning over the microphone, asking him in front of a live studio audience, in front of cameras, in front of America, to name something a wife hides from her husband. And picture that man, your man, leaning forward without hesitation, completely calm, completely certain, and giving an answer so unexpected, so impossibly precise, so perfectly wrong and somehow perfectly right that Steve Harvey had to take 3 steps back from the podium. Not as a bit, not for the cameras, but because what came out of that 81-year-old man's mouth in the next 40 seconds unlocked a family secret that had been folded up and carried in a coat pocket for 53 years. And the studio audience was laughing so hard they almost missed what the secret actually was. Almost. My name is Eugene Bernard. I am 81 years old. I have never in my life gotten the right answer at the right time. I was wrong about the weather in 1987. I was wrong about the horse in 1993. I was wrong about whether a certain bridge in Chattanooga, Tennessee could safely hold a 1998 Ford pickup truck. It could not. But on a Thursday afternoon in late March, inside a studio in Burbank, California, with 20 seconds on the clock and a question I was not supposed to know how to answer, I finally said exactly the right thing. This is how it happened. Family Feud has been on American television for nearly 50 years. Generations have grown up watching it. Families have sat in living rooms arguing about what the survey said. Grandparents have yelled answers at the screen with the kind of confidence that can only come from a person who has never actually been on a game show. Couples have disagreed loudly, firmly in front of company about whether sandwich was a reasonable answer for something you put in a child's lunchbox. It was number 1, by the way. The format never changes. 2 families, 1 host. A board of answers. The louder the wrong answer, the bigger the laugh. The bigger the laugh, the bigger the memory. The bigger the memory, the more likely that someone goes home and tells their own family, "You will not believe what happened." Steve Harvey has hosted Family Feud for over a decade. In that time, he has heard a contestant say refrigerator when asked to name a cold-blooded animal. He has watched a grandmother guess naked when asked to name something people do at the beach. He has stood perfectly motionless in a condition of full professional bewilderment, while a grown adult answered frisbee when asked to name something you throw for a dog. He has asked a man to name something that can come between a husband and his wife, and the man said a good fence. He has asked a woman to name an activity couples do together on a rainy day, and she said argue about whose fault the rain is. Steve Harvey has seen things. He has heard things. He has pressed the heel of his hand to his forehead and walked in slow, measured circles more times than any man should have to. He has made a face, his face specifically, the one where the eyes go wide and the mouth tries to decide what it's doing, so many times it has become its own separate cultural moment. And yet on a Thursday afternoon in late March, the Bernard family from Chattanooga, Tennessee walked into that studio and found a way to surprise him, not with a wrong answer, with the right one. The one he didn't know how to follow. The Bernards had come to the taping believing they were going to have a good time. Win some money, get Steve Harvey to make the face, go home with a story. They had not come expecting revelation. They had not come expecting to have 53 years of a family's carefully kept silence broken open in front of a live studio audience on a Tuesday. Well, on a Thursday, Eugene would clarify later afternoon. Plans, as Eugene Bernard was fond of saying, are just a list of things that haven't gone wrong yet. Eugene Bernard had been married to his wife Dolores for 53 years. He would tell anyone who asked that the secret to a long marriage was very simple. He said, never ask a question you don't already know the answer to, and always pretend you don't know the answer even when you do. Dolores would shake her head every time he said it, but she never disagreed. Eugene was born in Macon, Georgia in 1943. The third of 5 brothers in a house with no central air, 1 bathroom, a front porch that leaned slightly to the left, and a father who believed that a man's worth could be measured entirely by what he was willing to carry without asking for help. Eugene had grown up carrying things without asking for help. He joined the Army at 19. Served 2 years at Fort Bragg, trained as a mechanic, came home to Chattanooga in 1964 with a duffel bag, a box of tools, and not a single complaint about either. He got a job at the rail yard that December, became a union man, worked 31 years on the floor before they handed him a retirement watch at a breakfast in the break room and sent him home to Dollar's. He was the kind of man who fixed things with duct tape first and asked questions later. Who fell asleep in his recliner every Sunday at 2:07 in the afternoon, without fail, without alarm clock, like clockwork made of faith, right after the second hymn on the gospel channel. Who could not tell you where his car keys were on any given morning, but could give you the batting average of every starter on the 1969 Braves roster without being asked. He wore the same brand of work boot for 40 years, not because he couldn't afford a different kind. Because the man had found something that worked and had no interest in fixing what wasn't broken. That philosophy extended to most things in Eugene Bernard's life, including his wife. Dollar's Bernard was 80 years old, 4'11", and had a way of entering a room that made the room feel like it had been waiting for her. She had been a seamstress for 27 years, working out of a shop on Broad Street that she eventually owned. She had raised their daughter Carmen largely on her own while Eugene worked long shifts at the yard, and she had done it without making that fact feel like a grievance. She had opinions, strong ones, which she delivered in a voice so quiet and even that people often did not realize they had just been corrected until several minutes later. She and Eugene had been doing this, the quiet corrections, the pressed slacks, the Sunday recliner, the 3 jokes, the single piece of apple pie, for 53 years. They had buried parents together. They had watched friends' marriages end. They had sat in the same house through 1,000 ordinary Tuesdays. Their granddaughter Anya had applied for Family Feud as a birthday gift for Eugene. His 81st birthday had been in January. Anya was 26, sharp, fast, the kind of person who could read a room in 3 seconds and already had a follow-up ready before you finished your first sentence. She had submitted the video application on a Thursday night without telling anyone, using a clip she recorded of the family at Christmas dinner where Eugene was explaining, to nobody in particular, why the survey on any game show was always wrong because they never asked the right people. When the call came 8 weeks later, Anya drove to her grandparents' house and sat Eugene down at the kitchen table. She told him they were going on Family Feud. He looked at her over his glasses for a long time. Then he said, "I'm not doing nothing with my hair." "Granddaddy," she told him, "you have 4 hairs. I'm not asking you to do anything with them." The rest of the Bernard team was as follows. Carmen, Eugene, and Dollar's daughter, 49 years old, a school librarian with excellent posture, reading glasses on a beaded chain, and a laugh that could rattle windows from 2 rooms over. Desmond, Carmen's son, 23 years old, who had played college football for 2 seasons before his knees decided to retire without consulting him. He still had the energy and confidence of someone who once had a highlight reel and had never fully let go of the personality that came with it. And Hannah, Desmond's younger sister, 20 years old, who had taken 1 semester of television production at community college and now considered herself a comprehensive industry insider. These were the Bernards. Dollar's herself was in the audience. That was the part nobody on the team knew except Anya. Dollar's had flown in from Chattanooga the day before, accompanied by their cousin Marcus, who had driven her to the airport and sworn himself to silence under threat of being removed from the holiday card list. She was sitting in row 4, wearing the purple blazer she saved for occasions, with a small clutch bag in her lap. Inside the clutch bag was a folded piece of paper. Not a photograph, not a ticket stub, a letter, handwritten. The paper was the color of old cream. The ink at the edges had faded to a pale brown. The creases had gone soft from being folded and unfolded so many times they had become more fold than paper. She had been carrying that letter for 53 years. Nobody on the production team knew about it. Anya knew. She had planned everything down to the seat placement and the camera angle. But plans, as Eugene Bernard was fond of saying, are just a list of things that haven't gone wrong yet. The taping started at 1 in the afternoon on a Thursday in late March. The Bernards were matched against the Okafor family from Toledo, Ohio. The Okafors were fast, organized, loud in the good way, the way that fills a room. They had clearly watched a lot of episodes. They moved to the buzzer like a unit. Desmond watched them during the pre-show run-through and leaned over to Hannah. "They have a strategy," he whispered. "Of course they have a strategy," Hannah said. "It's a competition." "We don't have a strategy," Desmond said. "We have Granddaddy," Hannah said. "That's a strategy." Desmond considered this. "That's not a strategy, that's a wild card." "Some of the best strategies," Hannah said in the voice she used when she was quoting herself, "are wild cards." Desmond looked at his grandfather, who was standing at the edge of the contestant area reviewing a pamphlet about the show with the focused attention of a man studying for a certification exam he fully intended to pass. "Okay," Desmond said. "Fair." Steve Harvey came out to the audience before the cameras rolled. He did this every taping, moving through the rows, shaking hands, warming the room up until it felt less like a studio and more like a living room at a party where everyone already knew each other. He moved through row 4. He stopped at Dollar's. She gave him her hand and a smile. He looked at her for just a moment, a look of recognition of something filed and retrieved, and moved on without saying anything more, just a nod. He had been briefed. Then he got to the contestant area and he saw Eugene. He stopped, not because the producers flagged him, just because Eugene Bernard was the kind of man who drew your eye. 81 years old, sitting perfectly upright in a metal folding chair like it was a throne he had been assigned at birth. Jacket pressed, tie straight. The tie had small blue diamonds on it. His hands were folded flat on his knees the way you sit in a room where something important is about to happen. Steve crouched down slightly to get level. "Sir," he said, "you look like you are ready for something." Eugene looked up at him without blinking. "Son, I've been ready since Tuesday." "It's Thursday," Steve said. "I know," Eugene said. "I've been ready since Tuesday." The crew within earshot made various sounds of appreciation. Steve stood up and pointed at him. "This man right here," he said to no one in particular. "This man right here is going to be a problem." Eugene looked pleased. Anya, from 20 feet away, made a mental note to keep breathing. The main game started. The Bernards and the Okaforce went back and forth through 4 rounds. Carmen was precise on the buzzer. She had a librarian's instinct for categorization, for knowing what belonged where, and she clicked in half a beat faster than anyone expected. Anya and Hana worked together in a quiet, efficient way that looked almost telepathic. Hana would start a sentence, and Anya would finish it with the survey answer, and twice they were right. Desmond answered 2 questions correctly, and both times looked at the audience afterward as if expecting a highlight reel to begin. Eugene played 1 round. The category was things a man wears to feel more confident. He answered without a pause, "A good tie." It was the number 2 answer. He nodded at the board like they had agreed on this in advance. Steve Harvey said, "I respect that answer deeply, Mr. Bernard." "I know you do," Eugene said, adjusting his tie. "You're a man who understands neckwear." The audience laughed. Steve laughed. Anya stepped slightly to the left so she was out of camera frame and allowed herself a single quiet exhale. The Bernards won the main game, 432 to 387. Now it was fast money, 2 players, 5 questions each. Combined score had to reach 200 to win the $25,000 prize. Anya was selected to go first. Before the cameras repositioned, while the studio was briefly reorganizing itself, she found Steve Harvey near the edge of the stage and spoke to him for about 45 seconds. The audience couldn't hear what she said, but they watched Steve's face as she said it. He listened. His expression shifted once, not obviously, not dramatically, but if you were watching his eyes, you would have seen something recalculate. A brief reordering of what kind of moment this was about to become. He nodded. Straightened his jacket, turned back toward the stage. Eugene, sitting in the fast money chair with his hands on his knees, was looking at the board. He had no idea what his granddaughter had just said. He was focused. He was ready. He had, according to him, been ready since Tuesday. What he did not know was that his wife of 53 years was sitting in row 4 of the studio audience, wearing a purple blazer with a letter in her lap she had written the year their daughter was born. He did not know that. He would. Anya went first. She stepped behind the screen and answered the 5 questions in 20 seconds with the kind of focused calm that comes from having prepared for something and then deciding in the moment to simply trust the preparation. Question 1, name something you do right before bed. Read. Number 3 answer, 8 points. Question 2, name a reason someone might be late to work. Traffic. Number 1 answer, 38 points. Question 3, name something a wife hides from her husband. Money. Number 1 answer, 45 points. Question 4, name something that gets harder to do as you get older. Getting up. Number 2 answer, 29 points. Question 5, name a famous redhead. Lucille Ball. Number 1 answer, 27 points. Total, 147 points. She needed 53 more from Eugene to reach 200 and take home $25,000. The buzzer sounded. The scores were locked. Anya came out from behind the screen and rejoined the family. Then they brought Eugene out. He came from backstage the way he always walked everywhere, unhurried, even paced. The way a man walks when he has decided that the floor can wait for him and the floor has agreed. The audience applauded. He raised one hand, a single, unhurried wave. The wave of a man acknowledging a crowd that has correctly recognized something. Steve met him at the podium. "Mr. Bernard." "How are you feeling right now?" "Comfortable," Eugene said. Steve turned to the audience. "This man said comfortable, 20 seconds, $25,000. His granddaughter is waiting, and he said comfortable." Eugene adjusted his glasses. "Pressure is what you feel when you don't know what you're doing. I know what I'm doing." The audience applauded again. "All right, Mr. Bernard." Steve raised the card. "You ready?" "Son," Eugene said, I have been ready since Tuesday, yes, I know. Steve pointed at him. I know, let's go. He set the clock, 20 seconds, 5 questions. Question 1, name something you do right before bed. Pray. The board revealed. Number 2 answer, 12 points. Question 2, name a reason someone might be late to work. Traffic, Eugene said before Steve had finished the sentence. The board revealed. Number 1 answer, 38 points. Running total, 50 points. He needed just 3 more. The audience was leaning forward. Question 3, name something a wife hides from her husband. Eugene stopped. Not a long stop. 3 seconds, maybe 4, but in those 3 or 4 seconds, something happened in his face that was different from anything that had happened in his face all afternoon. It wasn't blankness. It wasn't confusion. It was recognition. The way a face looks when it hears a question that it has been carrying the answer to for a very long time and has been waiting, not consciously, not deliberately, but waiting all the same for the right moment to say it. He looked at the board. He looked at Steve. He said very quietly, very clearly, "The truth." Silence, not laughter, not the buzz of a wrong answer. Silence. The board operator paused. The audience paused. Steve Harvey paused. A camera operator 2 feet to the left of the podium looked up from his viewfinder, which he had not done in 11 years of taping this show. The board revealed. Number 1 was money. Number 2 was shopping. Number 3 was feelings. Number 4 was how she really feels about his mother. Number 5 was her age. The truth was not on the board. The X sound played. The audience made the collective sound of 200 people watching someone almost win something very large. But Steve Harvey did not move on. He looked at Eugene. He put the question card face down on the podium. "Hold on," he said. "Hold on." The clock was no longer running. A producer somewhere in the booth had pressed the pause that they were technically not supposed to press unless there was a medical emergency. "Mr. Bernard," Steve said slowly. "What truth?" Eugene looked at him. He reached up and touched the left breast pocket of his jacket, not a dramatic gesture, just a brief, reflexive touch. The way a man touches something he has been carrying for a long time to make sure it's still there. "The truth she's been keeping," Eugene said. "The one I've known about for 53 years and never said a word about to a single living person." The studio went so quiet you could hear the ventilation system in the ceiling. Steve Harvey did not move. He was very still. He was the kind of still that a person gets when they realize that the thing they are standing next to is not a game show moment. It is a life moment, and it is happening on live television, and there is nothing to do about that except stand next to it and let it be what it is. He looked at Anya. Anya nodded. Steve looked back at Eugene. "Mr. Bernard," he said carefully, "do you want to tell us what you mean by that?" Eugene was already reaching into his breast pocket. He pulled out a small folded square of paper, not a letter, not a photograph, a receipt. Old. The paper had gone the color of old ivory. The edges had yellowed and softened. The ink had faded but had not disappeared. It had been folded into a square no bigger than a matchbook, folded so many times and for so long that the creases had stopped being creases and had become features, lines as permanent as the lines in a man's palm. He held it in both hands, carefully, the way you hold something that has no replacement in the world. "In 1971, Eugene said, "my wife Dolores found out she was pregnant with our daughter Carmen." The audience was motionless. We had been married 6 years at that point. We had been trying for a baby for every one of those 6 years. He paused, not for effect, for breath. The pause of a man choosing each word the way you choose a board in a floor you're not sure will hold. "The doctors had told us it was not going to happen, not for us. Something about the chemistry, they said. They were not unkind about it. They just told us the truth and expected us to carry it." He looked down at the receipt. "We did carry it. We made our peace with it. Or I thought we did." The audience waited. "In the month before Carmen was born, I was looking for a button on Dolores' winter coat. She had asked me to fix it. I was going through the pockets looking for the button." He paused. "I found this instead." He held up the receipt. It was a payment receipt from a medical practice in Atlanta, a specialist in reproductive medicine. She had been seeing him for 2 years. A murmur moved through the audience. Not a sound of judgment, a sound of recognition, the sound of people realizing that the thing they are watching is real. 2 years, Eugene said. "Without telling me, she had been going to this doctor for 2 years, making these appointments, making these payments, and I didn't know a single thing about it." Steve Harvey was looking at him steadily. "Mr. Bernard," he said, "what did you do?" Eugene was quiet for a moment. "I put it back in her pocket," he said. "I buttoned the coat. I found the button she needed, and I never said a word." The woman in the 7th row, the one who had been holding it together since the beginning of this segment, stopped holding it together. "Why?" Steve asked, quietly, just the word. "Because," Eugene said, "she was 5 months pregnant with the child she had worked for 2 years in secret to give me, and I thought—" He stopped. His jaw moved for a moment. "I thought she must have had her reasons for not telling me. And whatever those reasons were, she had still done the hardest thing she had ever done in her life for us without asking for anything in return. and I didn't think it was my place to make her explain herself for that. He looked down at the receipt. I thought she'd tell me eventually. I waited. And then Carmen was born and life went forward the way life goes forward, and she never told me. And I realized she must have thought I didn't know. And by then, he spread his hands slightly. By then it felt like something I couldn't bring up, because too much time had passed, because bringing it up would have meant admitting I had known for 20 years and never said anything, and I thought that would hurt her more than not knowing had hurt me. He folded the receipt back into its small square. So I kept carrying it, 53 years, just me and this piece of paper. Backstage, in the family waiting area, Carmen was sitting in a plastic chair watching this on a monitor. She had been born into a world she thought she understood. Her parents had married young, had struggled to have her, had been told it wasn't possible, and then it had been possible. She had known this story. She had not known there was more to it. She had not known that her mother had fought for her in silence for 2 years, that her father had found the proof and carried it without a word for half a century. That the two people she had watched navigate their entire lives together had done so in possession of a shared secret neither of them knew the other one was keeping. She sat down because her legs decided that was what was going to happen now. Anya, watching from the wings, was absolutely still. She had known about the receipt. Her grandmother had told her 2 years ago, in a conversation that started as a way of explaining why Dolores had been looking through an old coat. Dolores had laughed when she found the receipt. She had laughed the way you laugh at something that is equal parts funny and enormous. She had said, "Your grandfather found this and never said a word. I always knew he had found it. I just didn't know how to bring it up." What Dolores had not known, what nobody had known, was that Eugene was carrying the receipt. Still, Anya had known the moment she planned this. She had known that the receipt had to be in the room. She had arranged for Dolores to come. She had not told her grandfather anything. She had trusted the moment. That was the bet. Now she was watching it happen, and she was trying very hard to keep breathing. But that was not the part that broke the room. Steve Harvey had been doing this a long time. He knew how to read a studio. He knew the difference between a moment that needed him to talk and a moment that needed him to be quiet. He knew the particular quality of silence that meant something was happening that had nothing to do with game shows, and that the best thing a host could do in that silence was get out of the way. He looked at the production booth. He caught Teresa's eye, the floor director, 11 years on this show, a woman who had seen every possible permutation of what could happen inside a studio and had developed an instinct for the moments that required her to override the run sheet. He gave her a look. She gave him a small nod. She spoke into her headset, and from the back left entrance of the studio, the door that opened onto the audience corridor, the one that contestants never used, a woman in a purple blazer appeared. Dolores Bernard, 80 years old, 4'11", moving with the deliberate, unhurried grace of a woman who had decided some decades ago that she would not rush for anyone or anything. She walked in small, careful steps. Her head was up. Her hands were folded in front of her, holding the small clutch bag she had brought from Chattanooga. The audience saw her before Eugene did. The reaction was not loud. It was the opposite. 200 people collectively understood what they were watching. They leaned forward almost as one, like a field of grass adjusting to a shift in wind. A woman in the third row pressed her hand flat against the face of the man sitting next to her, as if warning him to brace for something. Eugene still had the receipt in his hands. He was looking down at it. He did not know. Steve Harvey, for perhaps the first time in over a decade of hosting this program, said absolutely nothing. He stepped back from the podium. He simply pointed. Eugene looked up. He looked in the direction Steve was pointing. For a moment, a long, suspended, uncountable moment, he simply looked at his wife. It was a look that did not belong to a game show. It belonged to a kitchen table at 6 in the morning, or a hospital waiting room, or the front seat of a car in the rain. It was the look a person gives to something they have been seeing their whole life, and are only now at this particular moment truly seeing. Dolores stopped about 10 feet away. She was looking at him. Her expression was not dramatic. It was the face of a woman who had been carrying something for a very long time and had decided that today was the day she was going to put it down. She reached into the clutch bag. She pulled out a piece of paper. It was folded in quarters. The paper was the color of old cream. The edges were soft. It had been folded and unfolded many times. She had taken it out and held it twice a year every year for 53 years on their anniversary and on Carmen's birthday, and then folded it back. She unfolded it now, once, twice. A third time. The paper opened to a full sheet, covered in her handwriting. The letters were small and even and very close together, the handwriting of a woman who had always believed that blank space was space wasted. "I wrote this," Dolores said, "in November of 1971. The night the doctor called and told me I was pregnant." Her voice was steady, not controlled. That suggests effort. This was simply the natural voice of a woman who had rehearsed something until it no longer required rehearsal. I wrote it to tell him what I had done. Why I had done it, why I hadn't told him, and what I was going to say in the morning. She looked at Eugene. I put it in the pocket of my winter coat, and in the morning I was going to give it to him. Eugene looked at the receipt in his hand, the receipt he had found while looking for a button in the pocket of her winter coat, in the morning. But in the morning, he said very quietly, the receipt was gone. The receipt was gone, Dolores confirmed. And you never said a word. And I thought, she stopped. She blinked once slowly. I thought you didn't want to know. I thought you had found it and put it back because you didn't want to have the conversation. And I thought if that's what he needs, I'll give him that. I thought you didn't want me to ask, Eugene said. I thought you'd kept it from me because it was something you needed to have been yours alone, and I didn't want to take that from you. I thought you were protecting me, she said. I thought you were protecting me, he said. 53 years. 53 years of a marriage in which two people had been so carefully, so completely, so entirely devoted to protecting the other one from a conversation that neither of them realized the other one had wanted to have. A full woman's hand pressed over her mouth. A man 3 rows back had stopped pretending to look at the ceiling. The audience, collectively, was in a condition that had no precise name. It was not quite grief. It was not quite joy. It was the feeling of watching two people stand next to 53 years of something and see it clearly for the first time. Carmen came out from backstage without waiting for anyone to signal her. She walked without hurrying. She walked the way her father walked, she realized, somewhere in the part of her brain that was still processing things in an ordinary way. She hadn't known that before. She had gotten that from him. She reached her parents. She took one of her mother's hands and one of her father's hands. She held them. She could not say anything. She did not need to. Eugene looked at Dolores, then at Carmen, then back at Dolores. I knew it was you that made her happen, he said. His voice was very quiet. I always knew. I was always grateful. I just didn't know how to say it without telling you I'd known. And I thought if I told you I'd known, you'd spend the rest of your life feeling like you'd been watched. And I didn't want that for you. Dolores was quiet for a moment. You're a ridiculous man, she said. I've been told, he said. She reached up and straightened his tie. Steve Harvey made a sound, not a laugh, not a cry, something that lives in the geography between those two things in the country that doesn't have a name but that everyone has visited at least once. He put his hand over his mouth. He looked at the audience. The audience looked at him. Nobody said anything. Somebody started clapping, then somebody else. Then 200 people. The applause rose the way a tide rises, not a crash, a building. A growing weight of sound that came from 200 people who had not planned to feel this today and were feeling it anyway and were grateful for it, in the particular way that people are grateful for things that remind them of what they believe is true. The woman in the 7th row was not trying to hide anything anymore. The man next to her had his arm around her and had fully given up on the ceiling. Steve Harvey stood at the edge of the stage for a long time. He was not performing stillness. He was simply still. When he finally walked back toward the podium, he did not pick up the question cards. He stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at Eugene and Dolores and Carmen the way a person looks at something that has just reminded him of something he almost forgot to believe. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know something." His voice was lower than usual, not the host voice. Not the crowd work voice. The voice that only comes out a few times a season when something happens on the stage that was not in the run sheet and cannot be made into a segment and does not need to be. In all the years I have stood on this stage, and it has been a lot of years, I have watched people win money and lose money. I've watched people cry for both reasons. I've watched people come up here carrying the biggest things in their lives and lay them down for a minute to play a game. He paused. And I have never, not once, seen two people spend 53 years protecting each other from a secret that didn't need protecting. He looked at Eugene. That's not a flaw, sir. That is a marriage. That is what it looks like when two people love each other more than they love being right, more than they love being known, more than they love having the full story. He let that sit. Most people spend their whole lives trying to be understood. You two spent yours trying to make sure the other one was safe. That's a different thing. That is a much harder thing. Eugene looked at his wife. Dolores looked at her husband. She unfolded the letter one more time. She held it out to him. He looked at it. He took it from her hands. He held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it, which was almost no weight at all, a single sheet of paper, and the weight of what it carried, which was considerable. Then he folded it back exactly the way it had been folded. I don't need to read it, he said. No, she said. I know what it says, he told her. I've always known what it says. I just needed to hold it. He put the letter in his breast pocket, right next to where the receipt had been. One pocket, 2 pieces of paper, 53 years. The audience was on its feet, not in the performative way that audiences stand when they've been clapped at long enough, in the way where the legs simply carry a person upright before the brain has finished weighing in. Carmen was crying with no attempt to manage it. Anya had her forehead on Desmond's shoulder. She was not crying. She had planned this. She had planned every piece of this. She was simply exhausted in the way that you get exhausted when something you spent a long time building finally stands up on its own. Desmond, for the record, was completely fine, absolutely in control. His eyes were just sweating. Hannah, who had spent one full semester studying television production and considered herself, consequently, a comprehensive industry insider, turned to the nearest camera operator, a man named Harold who had worked this show for 8 years and had seen his share of moments, and said in a reverent whisper, "This is exactly why I got into this business." Harold, without lowering his camera, said, "You've been in this business for 4 hours." "The best 4 hours of my life," Hannah said. She was not wrong. Even Eugene laughed at that one. He had a laugh that was easy and full and unhurried, the laugh of a man who had found a long time ago that the world was more funny than it was anything else, and had decided to operate accordingly. The laugh filled the studio the way sunlight fills a room, not loudly but completely from corner to corner. Dolers took his arm. He put his hand over hers. They stood there in the middle of a game show set in front of 200 people and a dozen cameras in front of the board with its 5 blank answer slots and its X marks and its flashing lights, like two people who had built their whole life in one place and had finally completely come all the way home to it. Steve Harvey looked at the two of them. He looked at the audience. He straightened his jacket. "I have hosted this show," he said, "for a long time. And if you asked me right now in this moment what the purpose of it was, not the game but the show, I would tell you it is this." He pointed at Eugene and Dolers. "It is this right here. This is what it's for." The Bernards did not win the $25,000 that day. The clock never finished running. When the producers reviewed the segment, Eugene had technically answered 2 of the 5 questions before the interruption. His combined score with Anya came to 173 points. 27 short of the prize. When the final tally was announced and Steve confirmed the number, Eugene looked at it on the board for a moment. He shrugged the way you shrug at weather. "We didn't come here for the money," he said. "Granddaddy," Anya said, "we absolutely came here for the money." "Then we came here for the money and got something better," Eugene said. Nobody in the Bernard family argued with that. Afterward, in the green room, Steve Harvey found Eugene and Dolers sitting together on a small couch. He sat down across from them with a cup of coffee he didn't drink. They talked for about 20 minutes. No cameras, no crew. The production had moved on to resetting the studio for the next taping, and for 20 minutes the 3 of them sat in a room with a plate of cut fruit that nobody touched and had a conversation that none of them have repeated in full. What is known from things each of them has said separately. Steve Harvey told Eugene that he reminded him of his own father. Eugene told Steve that he had always liked his neckwear. Dolers told both of them that they were going to be late for the dinner reservation Anya had made, and that a man who had waited 53 years to say something did not get to use the green room of a game show as a reason to be late for a meal. They were on time for dinner. Carmen was told the complete story that evening in a restaurant booth in Burbank by her parents together with Anya and Desmond and Hannah present. She listened to all of it. She did not ask why they had never told her. She had thought about that question and decided somewhere between the studio and the restaurant that she already knew the answer. They had done it for her. The way they did everything. Everything they had ever done in 53 years of a life together, they had done for her. She said when they finished telling it, "I want to know about the doctor in Atlanta." So they told her that part too, the 2 years of appointments. The drive down from Chattanooga, which Dolers had made alone 6 times a year, telling Eugene she was visiting her sister. The payments, which she had made from a savings account she had opened in her own name in 1968 and mentioned to no one. The day the doctor called with the result that meant Carmen was going to exist in the world. Carmen sat in the booth and held both of her parents' hands and cried in the good way. The way that feels like relief. Anya kept the receipt. She has it framed now. It hangs in her apartment in Chattanooga, between a photograph of her grandmother's wedding day in 1970 and a photograph of her own baby picture taken in the summer of 1998 on a Sunday afternoon on the front porch of Eugene and Dolers' house. Between a love that started and a love that came from it. Eugene still says the secret to a long marriage is very simple. He says, never ask a question you don't already know the answer to, and always pretend you don't know the answer even when you do. Dolers still shakes her head every time he says it. She never disagrees. Some answers were never on the board. Some answers were always the right ones anyway. If this story settled into you, if it made you think of someone you love, or a conversation you've been carrying, or a truth that's been waiting a long time for the right moment, then you are exactly where you belong. We find the stories that happen quietly, in the spaces between the big moments, in the pockets of winter coats, in the receipts people carry for 53 years. Subscribe and we'll bring you the next one.